series that I've been doing this year. We'll probably do more next year. And by next year, I mean next church year. You ministers typically go away for June and July, but I'll be back. I'm going to go learn some Spanish. I'm tired of feeling stupid. So today's What's the Difference is what's the difference between venting and lamenting? There is a book called Lamentations in the Hebrew Scriptures. It's in the section of what Christians call the Old Testament. It's in the sections called Ketuvim, the writings. And the book is made up of 5 separate poems, and most of the poems are written in an acrostic form, and that just means that each line starts with the next letter of the alphabet. Hebrew has 22 letters, so there are 22 lines in the first 3 chapters, and then chapter 4, for some reason, has 3 sets of 22, and then the last chapter has 22 lines, but they're not starting with the different letters. That's more information than you needed. But in the first chapters, the city is sitting like a widow, bereft of all of her finery and sitting just covered in misery. Chapter 2 wonders whether it was maybe the sins of the nation that caused this calamity to befall them. And the calamity that the book of Lamentations is talking about is the capture of Jerusalem by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. And all the people in that part of Israel were taken to Babylon. And so you have the scripture that says, by the waters of Babylon we lay down and wept. We remember thee, Zion. It's not just a song by Bob Marley. Chapter 3 hopes that the chastisement that the people have suffered is going to do them some good, and it kind of asks the question, maybe this punishment was a little too big for the sins that we actually did. There's distress in there that maybe God deserted them. God's not anywhere in this book of Lamentations. God's voice, God doesn't speak in the book at all. It's just the people examining, what did we do? What could we have done? Lamentations are a form of prayer used in many ancient cultures. There are lamentations in Egypt and Sumeria, not just Israel. And they're a cry from the heart. They're crying out on behalf of the community. There's anguish in them. There's depth. There's self-examination. There's theological examination. Maybe things don't work the way we thought they worked. What might the lesson be? Is there a lesson? Is there meaning in this? Did we do something wrong? How did this happen? What are the causes? What could we have done differently? And so lamentation is rooted theologically in your relationship with wisdom or with the spirit of life or with God, with the universe. Now, venting, on the other hand, is just like letting off steam, right? And we were taught that it's good for you, that if you don't let your anger out, then it builds up inside like steam, and that you have to let it out, or it's like lancing a blister and letting all the bad stuff out, and that if you don't express your anger, that it'll turn inward and make you depressed. And this is really a story that I was taught as a therapist in the 80s, like 150 years ago. In the 80s, they were teaching us this, and so therapists would give people assignments like, go home and smack your mattress with your tennis racket and just get all that aggression out. Or in couples counseling, they had foam bats. You would just hit each other with bats. And but, then there's science. And neuroscientists are studying this. And what they found out is that it's not true. It's just not true That venting is good for you has become what Malcolm Gladwell would call a sticky story. It's a sticky story that just tumbles through generation after generation, and people hold on to it, all evidence to the contrary. They hold on to it, by they I mean we hold on to it because it feels good to vent. And it's a habit for some of us. So here's one of the studies. Dr. Brad Bushman at Ohio State University directed a study where students were each placed in a room and they were told to write an essay. So the students wrote an essay and they were told this essay was going to be graded by other students. So they turned their essays in, and then after a few minutes, they got their essays back with a big red F and a circle and a comment that said, "This is the worst essay I have ever read." Half of the students were given big pillows and told that they could just punch the pillows if they wanted to, get their anger out at this other student who had graded them so unfairly and so nastily. And the other half of the students were left in their individual rooms just with their thoughts to twirl their hair or look at their nails or think about video games or whatever. And so you see in the film these students punching the pillows, and really, truly, they're punching like this. I mean, they need a class, I'm telling you. So they're punching the pillows, and they're being really fierce. And then, here's how they're measuring aggression now. Then the experimenter comes back with a styrofoam cup and a bottle of hot sauce. And they say, the student who graded your paper is going to have to drink however much hot sauce you give them. And the students who just sat with their thoughts, twirling their hair, put about maybe an average of this much hot sauce in the styrofoam cup for their grader to drink. The students who had been pounding pillows filled up the cup. And so the neuroscientists think, after several studies like this, that perhaps expressing and venting your anger, physically or verbally, feeds it in a way, makes it worse. Now, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, we have a class, a group on neuroscience and religion. Bruce and Peter, will you raise your hands? There they are. These are the neuroscience guys. 2 guys on your brain, local. And they would be happy to tell you when their classes are, and you can also look in the order of service for the announcements. They're figuring out things that give the lie to things I was teaching my therapy clients in the 80s. Makes me mad. But I'm not going to punch anything. And what they say is that synapses that fire together wire together. Here's an example. If you have a certain thought, oh, it's just useless, what's the point, they're never going to change, or whatever. You have the thought and you think it, or you say it out loud. The synapses for that thought fire, and if you have that thought repetitively, the synapses wire together in whatever way they do. I can't pretend to understand it, but it makes a track in your brain so that if you think that thought repetitively, you are more predisposed to think that thought again. See what I'm saying? And we all have people who have stories that they tell about their parents or about their terrible ex or about their child or whatever, where it's like they just drop a needle in the groove and it just starts. And really, you don't even have to be there for it to keep going. They just go, and sometimes they even use, needle in a groove, by the way, is about an ancient technology. Some of you are hip enough to know about it, and some are old enough to remember it. So they just go, and that thought just goes and goes and goes, and you just hear it in their voice. They're on automatic. It's not helping them. And it's not helping you to listen to it. And the venting releases chemicals in their body and in your body that are stress chemicals that are very bad for you. They're bad for your blood sugar, they're bad for your blood pressure, they're bad for your brain chemistry. I would never say this really myself personally, but the neuroscientists say it, so I'm just quoting them. They said complaining and venting is like farting in an elevator. It just poisons the atmosphere for everybody around you. Complaining is harmful. And so, what do you do instead? Because complaining is pleasurable for the person who's complaining sometimes. And venting feels good. It feels like you're doing something. And, sometimes you are having a fruitful conversation about something that happened that triggered your strong feelings, and you're saying things that are going to move you forward. It's the stuckness that is harmful. You know what I'm saying? The stuckness doesn't get you anywhere. And so I'm going to go back to lamenting. It offers an alternative to venting. It's more often about the situation you're in relationship to a community. It asks you to examine yourself. It asks you to think about how you think things work. You're calling out to the spirit of life or to your wisdom, to the wisdom of the world. And your heart is in a lament the way it's not in a vent. In venting, as I said, you don't really need anybody else to be there, but somebody else usually has to be there, and it's not good for them. So let's talk about lamenting. I am a person who enjoys a good venting. Not necessarily by other people, but my own. And I have been venting quite a bit lately about this election cycle. And so I decided to try to write a biblical-style acrostic lament. So I want you to help me out. This is going to be all the letters of the alphabet. And so the first one is A. Just say A. All the people on both sides seem to have lost their civility. Both Democrats are saying things which seem to me to be unwise. Civil discourse seems to be becoming a lost skill. Donald Trump. Education is so important to democracy. Frustration and anger make better news than civil discourse. Great again? I think he means make America white again. History is a great teacher. I must admit, I used to be riveted by the horrible things said and done. Jefferson and Adams had a campaign that was much nastier than this one. Knowledge of history gives us perspective. Laughing at it is not working for me any longer. My heart is seized with sorrow for my country. Nausea grips me as I watch the news. Oh, how did we come to this? Fix. Please tell me everything is going to be all right. Quivering with dread, we listen for the next awful thing he'll say. Remind me that nothing too terrible has happened yet. Sweet dreams of justice in our society fuel our actions. Teaching civics in the schools would help people understand how things work. Understanding others is what I should work on before trying to be understood by others. Variations in views are a quality of every free society. We're all in this together. Xenophobia is a human failing we must always work against. Yelling is a sign that no communication is taking place. 0 is the number of ideas I have about how to fix this. So maybe next time you want to vent, I have a suggestion, but first I have a request. This knowledge from this sermon is to be used only for you. If you are thinking of a person who really needs to hear this, put that out of your mind. May I have your right hands, please? I will use this knowledge only for myself. Thank you. So next time you want to vent, take a moment to ruminate. Deepen yourself. Write a lament in biblical style. I know you can do it. There was a child of maybe 5 who did it right after the sermon on her bulletin. You might learn something from your own lament. You might ask yourself what part you are playing in the mess. And you might give your pain some forward motion.